everybody, my name is Ben Wright. I play second trumpet in the Boston Symphony, and I'm here in Virtuosity. I'm gonna try some trumpets. I get a lot of questions from people asking what's the best way to try trumpets. I think it's actually a really good question. It's really hard when you're younger to try trumpets effectively. And I would be a good example of that. I had a fairly bad C trumpet for all of my undergraduate, actually into my first job. Kind of left to my devices to choose the instrument. When you're a little less consistent, it's a little harder to try an instrument. So here's some ways that you can kind of make the process easier, less daunting. Okay, so what I have here in my hand is my trumpet, which is a Yamaha Zeno YM bell, slightly different lead pipe. This instrument is very comfortable for me. If you have an instrument you're generally comfortable with, you're not trying trumpets. That being said, try to take one with you to the store that you actually kind of like. Maybe it's a friend's, maybe it's your teacher's, that kind of thing. First thing with any process where you're trying instruments is to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples, right? So this is a Yamaha. So I'm going to compare today. I've got two Yamahas of different bell types and a Bach. So those are pretty close. They're not quite apples to apples, but maybe it's a Brayburn apple to a Granny Smith apple, right? So they're apples of different varieties. I would not throw a different brand into this mix because then I have too many variables and it's too confusing. So if you don't know what brands to look at, talk to your teacher, try to narrow it down to one or two. Okay, so the first thing I would do is make sure I was warmed up, which I already did. And then I just pick up the trumpets and I would just play a scale, right? And so the first scale would probably be some form of C major. And I try to do the same thing on all three trumpets. All I'm doing right now is getting a baseline for how the instrument feels. I'm also making sure they're set up the same way, right? So we play something easy and comfortable and familiar to us, right? So I'll do a Chikowitz variation that I do all the time. And I'm going to try to do the same thing on each trumpet. I'm just getting a general impression here. This is the 229-25M. I played 229s for many, many years. So let's see how this one feels. Again, I'm not going to play a whole concerto, a whole bunch of stuff. Right now, I'm just getting the initial impression. This is a Yamaha YS bell. We're back to the YM bell. Yeah, and that feels pretty good. So my initial impression is actually, I like all three of them pretty well. They've got a nice sound, pretty easy to move around on them. So now I'm gonna go back again, familiarize myself with my own instrument and how the blow is different. Again, we're staying in C major, and my instrument has actually been feeling a little resistant lately. So I actually am sort of looking for a new trumpet. So that's kind of that one is pretty appealing. It's important when you choose a range to try on the trumpet that you don't try to play something higher than you're comfortable with. So a high C for me is really comfortable. When I was a student, it was less comfortable. I get a lot of students who come in and have a horn that plays well in the middle and lower registers, but they have a real hard time getting the upper register. So if your range is, let's say, not comfortable up to a high C, then you need to have somebody with you who's got a good high C, because a benchmark on a C trumpet is a high C. That's part of what I'm listening for right now, is whether the high C is easy and whether it's easy to navigate my way up and down. That's also pretty easy. Again, the more consistent you are, the easier it is to try trumpets and kind of very quickly know what you want. The first time I tried trumpets with Tom Rolfson, literally, he played every trumpet and he said, "Oh, that feels pretty good. Oh, that feels pretty good." For him, like, he's a really great player, so like he can make any trumpet sound good. But then as he goes through it kind of this way, he kind of figures it out pretty quickly what works for him. Okay, good. So this is a good time to talk about what we're looking for in the sound. You want to make sure that the trumpet that you end up with is an instrument that you can basically replicate your sound on, right? If you don't have a real clear idea of what your sound is, then again, that's why you're going to have your teacher, more experienced people help you with the process, right? If I play my stock lick for trying trumpets is sort of a condensed version of the promenade from Pictures at an Exhibition. So I would sort of do this kind of a thing. Covers a decent amount of range. It's something I'm incredibly familiar with. And then when I go to the other instruments, I just do the same thing. Immediately, I find this very appealing. I like the sound. In some ways, I like it better than my C trumpet. It's definitely more open than my C trumpet. I can tell because there's less sort of resistance. When I sort of lean into the sound a little bit, I don't get so much pushback on that instrument, which is nice. So that's a little bit less comfortable for me in terms of where the instrument slots. I'm noticing that the tuning slide is slightly different than what I'm used to. So for me, I'm not sure this is really a good fit for me. For the vast majority of players who are not quite so specific with what they need, this is still very much in the running. It's quite an excellent trumpet. So just to review, all the bells have different names because the flair is different, right? So we play the YM bell in the BSO, so it's not surprising that sound is appealing to me, but this particular instrument also feels good to me. So I'm trying not to get too excited about it. I haven't tried all my other things that I want to try. This is a YS bell. This is also very solid, very easy. There's something about the sound that doesn't quite make me feel quite as happy as this other one. So I'm just going to go back and confirm that. Yes, I prefer this sound. So now I'm going to test some of the bad notes on C trumpets, right? So if I take my instrument, which I know to be a very well in tune, relatively speaking, C trumpet, I will play a scale and demonstrate just how out of tune it really is, right? So with absolutely no offense to the people that make these instruments, it takes a tremendous amount of precision to make an instrument consistent. That being said, they're still out of tune, right? So if I play this scale and I don't mess with any of the notes, I will trigger the D at the bottom of the staff, but I don't mess with any of the rest of the notes. This is the scale that I get. Right, so flat D in the staff, flat E in the staff, sharp F at the top of the staff. I didn't play F sharp, but it's also sharp. Sharp G at the top of the staff, sharp A at the top of the staff, slightly flattish high B, and then the C seemed actually okay. All of those notes tend to be out of tune on a C trumpet, right? You can't just push down the buttons and hope to get the right notes, right? What you want to do is push down the buttons and get something that's pretty close, right? So if I do the same thing on this trumpet, which is what I recommend when you're trying trumpets, is just to play a C major scale and don't mess with the pitch. Just see where the trumpet wants to play the notes. The only note I didn't love on that scale was the G, which sat low compared to the rest of the notes, right? It's not that big a deal because it's an easy note to manipulate. So if I manipulate it just a little bit, right? So when I know that the G is a little low, I can manipulate it and make it in tune pretty easily. So that's good. Now, I'm also going to do a G major scale because the G at the top of the staff is a really critical note and we play it all the time. And I want to know just how sharp it sits on this trumpet. And actually, it doesn't sit that high at all for me. If I put that note that I just played on a tuner, it's definitely going to be sharp, but I like how it rings. It's an acceptable level of sharp, right? So the D was not overly low. Generally speaking, I thought that scale was pretty good. I can modify it to make it in tune pretty easily. It rings the way I want it to ring. This is continuing to be the front runner in this small search, right? All right, let's try the Bach. The scale is definitely less even on this instrument. The D is way lower, but that's typical of a 229. Now I have to figure out if I can get the D in tune without too much effort, right? So I'm going to start with it where the trumpet wants it, and then I'm going to blow it in tune. So the G at the top is really quite nice on this. The D is maybe not really exactly where I want it, but again, like overall in the grand scheme of things, it's an acceptable level of low. So Yamahas in general don't tend to have that flat D, which honestly I love. So the scale on this is the most in tune of the three, but it's also the most uneven with timbre. I hear different colors. The top G I like quite well. There's a lot of sort of less clear ones. And I would say in general, all trumpets are out of tune. They're close, especially the ones we have here are extremely close. We have not tested low register. We need to do that. So first, just play chromatically down there. A flat tends to be a really flat note on that trumpet that I'm somewhat smitten with. It's not flat at all. A flat sits a little bit low on this one, but it's a beautiful tone down there. It's a little thicker than what we tend to do in the BSO, and that's immediately where I tell that I don't like the sound. So I'm kind of done with this trumpet. It's very personal. So like 20 people could try this trumpet, and 19 people might say, "Hey, that's a really great trumpet." That doesn't mean it's not a great trumpet just because I don't like it, right? It's just not. It's not giving me the sound that I want from it. So I'm not even going to do anything more with it. You might start to put your instrument through like slightly harder paces. So like, let's say You could choose a lick from the middle of Enesco Legend, which goes up to a high C. It's fortissimo. I want to know how the instrument responds fortissimo and also quite soft. So I'm gonna do the fortissimo licks now. That feels pretty good. Or I should say, it feels about like it should. This feels a little difficult for me to get into the upper register. So I know that this is not the instrument for me, right? So if you go up to a note that you normally have in the palm of your hand and it's difficult to get there, then you know that that's probably not the instrument for you. Okay, so now you want to have something to play that's maybe a little softer, and also you want to test like the clarity of the articulation of the instrument. So I like to use Debussy Fête, which is pretty soft. It's responding quite quickly. It feels pretty good to me. The other thing you want to test with the C trumpet is just how easy it is getting sort of up and down, right? One of the licks from Also Sprach Zarathustra that I really like is on the first page. It covers kind of the meat of the range we have to do. So again, pretty much everything I play on this instrument I like. Okay, so the other thing you want to do is you want to test flexibility, right? So sometimes instruments will have slots that are kind of wide apart. Things that you normally do on the trumpet that require a great deal of flexibility will feel more difficult. You don't have to do really fast lip trills. It just could be... So if I go to this other instrument that felt a little bit more difficult to me, that lip trill is going to feel different. The slots just for me on this instrument don't work. They're too far apart with the way that I blow through the trumpet. Doesn't mean it's not going to be a great trumpet for somebody else. We talked about high C's. We talked about D's in the staff. We talked about G's at the top of the staff. Those are notes to check, right? And so if you're not consistent above, A above the staff, then you need somebody to test your high C's for you. Don't pick up a C trumpet for the first time and go try them, right? You have to kind of know the beast a little bit. Any of these trumpets are way better than what I had when I was an undergraduate. You don't have to have a Ferrari, but you got to have at least a Toyota Camry, right? So I would say that these are all different varieties of fancy sports cars as far as C trumpets are concerned. Bravo to the folks at Virtuosity for getting these trumpets, because this is pretty rare to have 3 really great C trumpets all in one spot. Thanks so much to Steve Johnson and Virtuosity Musical Instrument Company for suggesting this idea. I love the idea of putting stuff out there that makes things easier. So that's part of what I do with my program, which is called T5, training trumpeters to teach themselves. And you can find information out on my programs at benwrighttrumpet.com. And if you have any questions, you can contact me there. I'm always happy to answer messages and questions as often as I can. You don't have to have a Ferrari. You need at least a Ford Taurus. No, who drives a Ford Taurus?